Calls from different sectors for immediate steps to avoid a food security crisis are unfolding due to load shedding are getting louder. This as continued power cuts threaten food and water supplies and disrupting the lives of millions of people, including farmers. Now, let's discuss this further. We're now joined via Zoom by Managing Director at Food Forward South Africa, Andy du Plessis. Mr. du Plessis, thank you so much for your time. You know, load shedding isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So what can be done in the meantime to reduce its impact on the poor?
Nati, thank you very much for having us. So, yeah, absolutely. We are finding that throughout our food value chain, farmers, wholesalers, retailers, manufacturers, that there are huge amounts of supply chain disruptions. So I think the first thing that we need to really seriously consider is how do we make sure that we get food to households that can't even afford basic food, groceries. What we're finding in South Africa is that over 27% of our children up to the age of 5 years are struggling with malnutrition-related diseases like stunting. And what that means is that a third of our children up to the age of 5 years, their cognitive development is just not there. So we need to make sure that the poorest households get the food that they need, which is what Food Forward SA is at the top of our agenda. The second thing that we really need a supply chain to work better with us is when there are supply chain disruptions with farmers, wholesalers, retailers, manufacturers, and there are huge amounts of good food, edible food, but not sellable food. We are encouraging supply chain actors to donate that food to organizations like Food Forward SA. In the last few weeks, we've heard about chickens being culled, and we heard about milk being dumped because of load shedding issues. And we are appealing to the food value chain. Rather contact Food Forward South Africa. We provide food to almost a million people that are starving through a network of close to 3,000 registered charities that receive food from us each month. And when farmers and wholesalers, retailers, manufacturers have those disruptions, they must just contact us, please.
You know, I'm sure you're not the only organization that does this kind of work in terms of, you know, asking for these manufacturers to donate, you know, foodstuff. But the reality is it becomes very difficult for farmers. I mean, you mentioned, of course, you know, what we've been seeing recently in the industry where, you know, farmers are forced to, for instance, throw out 12,000 liters of milk because it turned sour, so it's not consumable. And of course, you mentioned the poultry industry also having had to discard and slaughter 10 million chickens as a result of electricity, you know, outages. But I hear what you're saying in terms of working together as a value chain, because the realities on the ground is that we are facing food, insecurity or lack of security around the value chain. But is there a way in which we can work better as society to make sure that, for instance, what we saw in the Eastern Cape not too long ago, hearing reports of children under the age of 5 dying because of malnutrition?
Yeah, absolutely. So 100% agree. I do think that not only consumers, but the private sector business is under huge amounts of pressure. And we have to say that the current kind of load shedding we have been seeing for the last 6 months, 7 months or so is not sustainable. So the long-term effect is just crippling because as value chain actors have to buy diesel and use capex budgets to put in huge amounts of infrastructure to cope with the load shedding stress so that their operations can continue, we find that what the result is food prices are going to increase. So government really needs to relook at firstly the diesel refund and how organizations and businesses can access more of that diesel refund sooner. And then we also need to look at how can we make sure that those falling through the safety net, those not getting social grants, those on the social relief of distress grant or on the waiting list of those social relief of distress grants, we need to make sure that we get food to them as soon as possible, because as you said, in the Eastern Cape, in the last 6 months in the Eastern Cape, over 100 new cases of child malnutrition were recorded, and of those, 43 children died of malnutrition and starvation. This is just unacceptable, and we need to make sure that the poorest households get food, because these at-risk children are dying. We are failing our children, and we need to do more.
So in the meantime, what can we do, especially as societies, in terms of how do we better prepare ourselves, especially because we've just been discussing how load shedding is exacerbating this problem. But how do we better, prepare ourselves in terms of creating a self-sustainable society, whether it's in schools or in our communities, using churches, for instance, or our own backyards to create these and foster these, creative ways of handling this situation.
Yeah, so absolutely. One of the things that we are working with is an intersectoral collaboration is key. This is the solution. While we are in this kind of crisis, this humanitarian crisis, we are in intersectoral collaboration is key. The Food Forward South Africa is working with the Department of Health, the Department of Social Development, as well as other role players involved in nutrition. And what we are hoping to do is in the next few months, roll out a specific nutrition program for children that are at risk. So that's one of the mechanisms that we could follow. A second mechanism is local charities are struggling to keep their doors open. As more and more people are inundated for food support. And so we are calling on local people around local communities to rally around and support their local communities, especially where there are community feeding programs. And then also local farmers where they can donate surplus food to local charities just to support and provide fresh produce for children in the short term, to make sure that we are able to, so that poor people can access more food in the short term. Those are kind of solutions that we are looking at.
Andy du Plessis is, of course, the Managing Director at Food Forward South Africa. Thank you so much for your time, Andy.